Let's now take you back to our top story, which is about India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, being in Kuala Lumpur to represent Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the 20th East Asian Summit. The summit is providing an opportunity to deliberate upon the challenges of peace, stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and also exchange views on regional and international developments. To talk about it further, we are joined by Ambassador Gurjeet Singh, former senior diplomat. Good afternoon to you, Ambassador Singh. What do you make of how India and ASEAN have taken their relationship forward, particularly when now trade has become a large talking point with the kind of developments that have been taking place in recent months?
Thank you for having me. Today is perhaps the busiest day in Kuala Lumpur in what is called the ASEAN and related summits meetings. The ASEAN summit concluded day before yesterday, and yesterday was the day for some of the bilateral summits, like India had its bilateral summit yesterday. So did the United States and Japan. The United States and Japan, of course, did their bilateral summits and left Kuala Lumpur because they were having another bilateral in Tokyo from today. But today is the day when other countries, 4 other countries, would have their bilateral summits, and they would be the 20th East Asia Summit and the 5th summit of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Now, that is the economic summit, but as you recall, India is not a member of the RCEP, having withdrawn in 2019. Therefore, the most important summit for us today is the East Asia Summit, which is celebrating 2 decades. And India, since 2005, has been an original member of this outfit. This is rather important because when India was included in the East Asia Summit in 2005, it brought India into the regional vortex of all the important meetings and then subsequently led to the emergence of the Indo-Pacific. Till then, India had been excluded from regional summits like the APEC, which we are not members of even till today. Certainly, economics is in command, and everybody is talking about supply chains, about tariffs, about critical minerals and resilience. So everybody wants to know what the other one is doing. Normally, people would be worried about what China is doing because that is critical to all of us. But I think this time around, everybody is worried about what the United States is doing because they were a steady friend and not expected to upend the economic order in this way. So I think there is a huge khichdi happening right now in which everybody has got a question mark and distrust rules high despite everybody shaking hands in Kuala Lumpur.
Yes, Prime Minister Modi was initially supposed to go there himself, but he addressed the leaders there virtually, and it is the External Affairs Minister who's representing him, and a lot of focus has been on how India has been trying to rework the kind of trade agreement that it has had with ASEAN, where the ASEAN nations have had a slight advantage. Do you feel that the progress there has been satisfactory?
This agreement is called the ASEAN-India Trade in Goods Agreement, or ITGA. Now, this review is to be completed this year in 2025. Prime Minister did say yesterday that if you complete this review and make this ITGA relevant to the times, it will facilitate a modern engagement between India and ASEAN, particularly opening the resilient supply chains. The Malaysian Prime Minister, in his preface before opening the meeting with India, did say that substantive progress has been made on the review of ITGA, and he remains hopeful that it will conclude this year. Now, this is important because Malaysia is the lead for the trade negotiations with India on ITGA. And therefore, when Prime Minister of Malaysia says this, that means progress has been made. In recent months, we know that more rounds of negotiations have been held, but somehow the more greater attention has gone to what India is doing with the United States, because that is more threatening, whereas with ASEAN, we are trying to be more creative. But yes, to my mind, a good review of the ASEAN-India trade in goods agreement will create the right atmosphere for the South-South cooperation, and what yesterday the Prime Minister said, we want a balanced relationship with ASEAN, that will emerge. I would like to point out here that, unlike other agreements, here ITIGA is one of 3 agreements that we have with ASEAN. The ASEAN-India investment agreement is a separate one, and the ASEAN-India agreement on services is a separate one, and they came into effect 7 to 8 years later after the ITIGA in 2007. So those are not being renegotiated now. It is only the trade in goods which India felt was against us. For long, India has felt that the optimum results expected of ITIGA have not come our way and to our industry. So I think it is time for ASEAN to realize that and work towards using it as a building block. However, other people say that despite the faults of the ITIGA, in its time, India-ASEAN trade has grown, doubled, and today it is at about $123 billion, which of course in ASEAN's favor. So that brings ASEAN into the 5 big entities with whom India has a trade of over $100 billion. So you have to watch this volume versus quality debate as we go along.
Okay. The other thing, 2 things that are being watched very closely, I guess, particularly in KL as well, with all those nations participating, is what's happening between President Trump and Presidents Trump and Xi in terms of their talks on trade and other matters, and also how perhaps India in recent months has seen an improvement in ties with China, with flights resuming, commercial flights resuming just yesterday after the COVID break, and that has been a very long break. So that would also be of a lot of interest as well.
There have been incremental improvements in restoring India-China ties to vitality. I don't think we are there yet, but yes, flights have now resumed after a hiatus of 5 years. But I did not see Dr. Jaishankar meeting his Chinese counterpart in Kuala Lumpur. That I have not seen. There is no other occasion because India is not going to the APEC summit. But neither did Trump meet the Chinese premier in Kuala Lumpur. The Chinese divide who represents them. To EAS, always the Chinese premier comes, whereas President Xi always goes to APEC. So President Trump is hoping to meet President Xi in Korea for APEC, whereas this occasion in KL was used by his economic team to meet with the Chinese Commerce Minister and try and work out issues revolving around TikTok, revolving around rare earths, revolving around soybeans, and the whole question of tariffs and sanctions on either side. I have seen separate statements by the American and Chinese delegates saying they have made progress. But is this enough progress for President Xi to agree to meet President Trump in South Korea, on which President Trump seems to have staked the entire success of his visit to this region?
Right. Well, that still remains a question. The Americans have very clearly said that the meeting is happening, but the Chinese have not. So that's where things are at the moment. Let's leave it there and see what comes next. Thanks a lot for joining us for the moment, Ambassador.
Thank you for having me.